Hello and welcome to a very special week here on Pondering Papaya as we take you behind the scenes of the McLaren team. Each day we're going to be bringing you an interview of someone who's either worked for the team or has a very special connection to it, and they'll give you a fascinating insight into what life at the MTC is like. To kick the week off, we are revisiting some of our previous interviews that older listeners may already have heard, but fear not, as there'll be two brand new episodes on Thursday and Friday. On today's episode, we're speaking to McLaren's Director of Sustainability, Kim Wilson. Kim told us all about the unique challenges an F1 team faces when it comes to the climate, and she also explained how McLaren's innovative technology makes them one of the leading teams on the grid. A fair warning, this was recorded during the British Grand Prix weekend, in fact just after FP2, and was even recorded from team principal Andrea Stella's desk in the McLaren hospitality unit. So there may be some background noise, but hopefully you can hear Kim loud and clear for this fascinating chat. Enjoy the show. Before we get into the team, I sort of wanted to talk about your history. I looked up a little bit, I searched on LinkedIn, did a LinkedIn search. Obviously you worked for EDF Energy before, yes. And then you moved to McLaren. Sort of, what was it about F1 that attracted you, sort of the team, and why did you make the move across?
So, I must admit, when I first saw the opportunity, I wasn't 100% sure what it was all about, but the more I looked into it, how amazing that motorsport is at the forefront of innovation and technology. All of that engineering, R&D and expertise and that pioneering culture was really attractive, and that's what we need in sustainability. And then the other side of it is, sport is such an incredible platform for trust and getting your message out, and McLaren Racing has such a fantastic fan base. So it was a really good way of maybe getting people in the mainstream to care a little bit more about this subject and to speak to those people, because you do find that sustainability people can often end up in a little bit of an echo chamber convincing each other, and we don't need 10% of the population to care all the time, be perfect. We need everyone to care a little bit and take a little bit of action. So that's what was really attractive. And also the opportunity to establish a brand new team. I'm the first ever sustainability director for McLaren Racing and in Formula One. To set a strategy from scratch and build a team was really a great opportunity.
Yeah, we'll delve a bit more into your role, but how have you found it overall, sort of being in F1, being in the mad world of F1 really?
It's exhilarating and inspiring. I love the culture of a team. We all have a really clear purpose and we're all pointing in the same direction. That's fantastic. But I also love this sense of bravery to try things, of innovation. We don't give up, we only look forward, and that's been a fantastic place to be. It's a great time to be here.
Yeah, you mentioned your job, obviously Director of Sustainability. I wonder if you could sort of break down that a little bit, what that means, sort of what's your day to day. I imagine there's no 2 days the same, but sort of what's your overall role really?
So in a nutshell, my role is to understand our risks and opportunities around our impacts on society and the environment, and then develop programs to be able to address those. So I would say it's more, people have a perception that motorsport has lots and lots of negative impacts, and I'm not saying that we don't, but we have to get our house in order. But actually our biggest opportunity is to lean into innovation, to lean into solutions, prove the concept, do it fast, because that's what you do in Formula One, and then show that back to the world and show what is in the art of possible, because I think we're spending too much time admiring the problem of sustainability and not enough in terms of action. And so I think we're in a great position.
We can talk about the problems a little bit. I think maybe let's discuss F1 and sustainability to begin with, because obviously I think when people think of F1 they probably think, the biggest polluter, whatever you call it, is the cars. But obviously, as we both know, it's the getting to and fro from the races. Sort of, how big a challenge is that in particular? Obviously, we're speaking from Silverstone, it's a European race, but obviously we've got a lot of flyaway races. Can you sort of explain what the challenges are about for the teams getting A to B with all this equipment, all these amazing cars, all these amazing buildings, sort of how you do that in a sustainable way?
Yeah, so we do have to address this, because about a third of our carbon footprint is around moving our cars and our garage equipment and our people around the world, and we're only growing as a sport, and we therefore need to do the responsible thing but also use our platform. So what we've been doing is at McLaren Racing is over the last few years we've been looking at what we're sending in air freight and then trying to transfer that into shipping and sea, because that's 97% less carbon intensive and impactful than air. So that's the first step. So over the last 2 years, we've had a really big program, and that's reduced our emissions from there by about 9.7%. And that's halved the amount of things we've been sending around the world by air. We're a growing sport and a growing team, so we can't really get away from the fact that we're sending people around the world. We are looking very carefully at making sure we maximise the benefit of that. But that's why we have entered into a partnership with Ecolab to look at what is in the art of the possible for sustainable aviation fuel, because we need to lean into technology and innovation to enable to do that.
Mm-hmm. And do you think Formula One, in sort of, obviously we always talk about how there's 24 races, we always talk sort of about the human side of it,
Yeah.
but is that a particular challenge for yourself? Because obviously we've got a triple header now, yes it's all in Europe, but it's very quick turnaround, and it's even more so when we've got like a flyaway triple header. Like, sort of, what kind of challenge is that for you and your team?
So from our perspective, one of our 4 pillars of sustainability is health and well-being, and this is a high pressure, high performance environment, and people think about it not just being, they think about the race team, and absolutely that we've got a big team sort of supporting on the commercial side, but actually even people in the factory building the car, it's high pressure. And so we've got this program around supporting health and well-being for our people. We've looked at we've trained up 7% of our organisation to be mental health first aiders, so a bit like your St John's ambulance, physical health first aider, but they're there as support for their peers and their colleagues. We've also got mechanisms in place to enable people to look after themselves. And then we've got a fantastic support team. And at the moment, we're also looking at our facilities back at the MTC in Woking. And we're building a new health and human performance centre so that people can really look after themselves. And that's what we're doing, enabling them to do that, providing the facilities to do it.
And I understand that McLaren's sort of been on the cutting edge of how can we be more sustainable. I think one of the big successes probably has been your work with carbon fibre, and I think if you want to explain the difficulty in recycling that, because obviously it's not the easiest material to do so, and how you've managed to do that, and sort of where the team's taken that, and essentially what you use it for now.
Yeah, so carbon fibre is the material that we're using to make most of the body of the car, and that's a really fantastic material in terms of strength and weight. But the only way you can dispose of it at the moment is not particularly environmentally friendly. You can't really recycle it. But we have found an organisation who are exactly doing that. They're taking the waste from mainly the aerospace industry at the moment, and they've been able to produce a carbon fibre that is as good in terms of its performance as what we currently use, but 90% less intensive across its life cycle than standard carbon fibre. So that's revolutionary. We trialled it at Austin at the US Grand Prix last year and didn't affect performance, so we've now taken it into our new aerodynamics package, and we ran it on Oscar's car at free practice today in a new part, and our vision is that in the future we can prove the concept that this could be used full stop on the car. Now that's an incredible thing to prove to the rest of the grid and to our regulators, so that they can incentivise the use of it and the development of that. But also it's really important that we look at how we can then take that back into the wider world and industry, not just automotive, but also things like, there's going to be a lot of wind turbines that are going to have their blades needing to be recycled, and creating a market for that and not constantly using virgin resources is such a wonderful thing that we can be doing.
I wanted to touch on both those parts really, but let's start with the teams really, because obviously in F1, if someone finds out something works well, pretty soon the whole paddock's got it. But obviously, while there's a competitive side to that, I'd imagine it's quite cooperative, isn't it, between the different teams? So, like you say, when you come up with something like carbon fibre, imagine you've got other teams knocking on your door saying, "Oh, how can we do similar?" Do you feel like it's quite a unified grid and sort of pushing towards more sustainability?
So we're all we've all got, to a greater or lesser extent, so people focused on sustainability as a team. We're very privileged at McLaren that I do have quite a large resource compared to some of the other teams, but we are all focused on pointing in the right direction on how do we reduce our impacts and give back to the world. It is obviously competitive. We are a competitive sport. So the way we work is we all are focused on different aspects. So we're very much focused on the circularity of the car and that sort of thing. Other teams are focused on other things, and then we share back. And we do have a forum where we collaborate and share what we're doing in that space. But the big thing we're collaborating on at the moment is how do we look at the 2026 regulations and unlock the potential decision of, do I spend my cost cap money on sustainability innovation, or do I spend it on car performance? And obviously, in a competitive environment, the latter is going to win. But we want to prove things like this recycled carbon fibre can actually achieve both.
And on that subject, like how supportive of people like Zach Brown obviously been? I mean, we're lucky enough to be sat in Andrea Stiller's office. Like, how have they found? Because obviously, I'd imagine if you came to them and said, "Look, I can get you a part it's been recycled and it's done no difference to performance, it's absolutely fine." That must be like a great tick for them if they think fantastic.
Yeah, and I have incredible support from the whole team, from Zach, the executive team. Here's our Chief Operating Officer. He's really been pushing hard to ensure that he sees the opportunity here in the factory, and he's the one who's really made sure that we got this part on the car for Oscar this weekend. So it's an absolute team effort.
We're talking after you obviously published your annual report in May, and I sort of wanted to clarify for you, it might just be me that I don't know, but I was very interested in a bit. It said you reduced in 25% in Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. And I must admit, there might be me, but I don't know what a Scope 1 and Scope 2 emission is. So I was wondering, could you clarify what that is and sort of how you achieve that goal?
Yeah, so Scope 1 and 2 emissions are essentially the emissions within our direct control. So in our context, it's the energy we use in our factory, it's the the fuel that we use in the vehicles that we own and operate. So we've moved to 100% recycled electricity across all our facilities, and we've also started using biofuel, and we've actually got a tank now based at our headquarters in Woking where everything that leaves the site is filled with biofuel, which is just a sustainable drop-in fuel rather than using petrol or diesel. So that's the sort of thing we've been doing at the moment, and we're working further on other opportunities with the European racers around what we can do in this space.
And speaking about the MTC, like how much to your benefit has that been? Because obviously it's a very, even though it's a few decades old now, it was very like forward thinking at the time. Like, is there things you've been able to do with that have sort of really helped the sustainability drive and like sort of the unique aspect of that building? Because I think everyone listening will know what it looks like and sort of the inside, but how does it work on a functional basis?
So I don't know whether many people know that the lake is actually a really integral part of the heating and cooling system.
I think I did, but I think you're right. Not a lot of people know that. Yeah. So explain that.
Even though it's 20 years old, this building, but it was still pretty cutting edge in terms of that system, and then we've done things like. It was cutting edge at the time, but we've now replaced all of those lights with LED, and that's had a massive impact on our energy efficiency, and we're just continually looking for other opportunities. But as we grow as a team, you have to balance more energy versus how to be more efficient in that space.
And you touched a bit on earlier about the sort of perception of F1. Obviously, we're speaking at Silverstone where a few years ago, obviously there's protesters about the climate, stuff like that. Do you think there's perhaps not a harsh perception, but maybe like a false one about F1? Because I think people see it and they think, oh, they're just polluting the planet, they're ruining it. But people like yourself are obviously working really, really hard. And like you said, these things you do now, like we see this also with the competitive side, you do this now, it has an impact on the real world a few years down the line. Do you think F1 is a sport that's perhaps doing more than a lot of other sports in this regard?
I think we're doing things that we're maybe not telling the world about well enough. I think the other misconception is that sustainable drop-in fuel, which I won't talk about hugely because it's not part of our direct control, but that is something that is only, the amount of fuel we use is only 1% of our impact. But it's still really important because we can give that back to the rest of society and still then use the existing vehicles that are out there that have a remaining life. What we're focused on at McLaren Racing is how can we use our F1 engineering and our know-how. So we've looked at how we build the car, and that's the bit we've talked about, recycled carbon fibre. But the other piece is there are so many solutions the world needs that are out there that are great. They just don't have the attention and the spotlight to be able to attract the investment, to be able to grow and scale, to benefit everybody. So that's why we've developed our climate contribution programme. And that's really exciting because that's taking the F1 know-how, the mindset, the data analytics, the looking at what drives performance, and we've really focused our effort on supporting 3 projects, and they all are looking at how do we remove excess carbon from the atmosphere, which we all need to do, and also preserve damaged ecosystems and preserve biodiversity and restore back damaged ecosystems. So we're working with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation to help restore the Great Barrier Reef. We're working with an organisation called Momback, which is looking at how do we take degraded pasture land, cattle ranch pasture land, and restore it with biodiverse species in the Amazon. And then the final one is really interesting because it's called Undo, and it's called enhanced rock weathering. It's a natural process where the rain reacts with rock, and then it turns into bicarbonates and stored in the soil. It happens over thousands of years, but by spreading very fine particles onto the soil, it reacts faster and it speeds up the process, so you can do it in about 20 years. And that's really important because it also helps local communities with agriculture, so they co-benefits as well. So we're focusing on 3 really lovely projects, but using our engineering know-how and expertise to help those projects look at how they can scale and speed up their programs.
I mean, it sounds like an incredibly rewarding job, but would you say elements like that are particularly rewarding? Because yes, it's good like being part of a successful F1 team and it's all exciting, but when you see like these having impacts on people's lives, like that must like be really like, I don't know what the word is, but like really
Gets
proud.
me out of bed in the morning.
Exactly, something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, it's something. It can't just be because I love it as a person, and I do, and I'm passionate, and that's why I do it in my team. But actually, what I've been so encouraged about is how engaged the wider team have been on particularly the piece of work we've been doing with the Great Barrier Reef Foundation, because that's most progressed and advanced. Oscar came out to Australia to have a look, which always helps in terms of him understanding what we're doing and being able to raise the profile of that. So yeah, it's really great to be able to take action rather than just talk about the problem, but I really feel like we can be part of the solution.
I want to talk about another area where sort of you've developed and innovated really, is sort of when it comes to team kit. And I won't tell you who, but someone a long time ago said like in the early 2000s they just used to burn all the kit at the end of the year, and that's just horrendous to hear, but obviously that doesn't happen anymore, we can thankfully say. So sort of what happens to team kit at the end of the year? Because as we know, they get replaced for next year, we all sort of see a new design. Where does that go?
So we've done a couple of things. The first thing is we have shifted so that you don't actually have different designs of trousers and bottom halves across all of our series that are specific to the series, so that you don't have to produce as many. I think that's been a really important piece. The other thing we've done is we've actually taken back all of the kit over the last 2 years, and we are currently looking at a program to how do we then create a whole program of upcycling those into other things. And I was literally just talking to our supplier about that a few hours ago on what we're going to do. So watch this space.
In terms of looking ahead, sort of, I mean, F1 as a sport, like what would you say the main challenges facing F1 in terms of sustainability? Because F1 itself is obviously really keen on pushing stuff like net zero for 2030. Like you said, we've got all these new engine regulations coming in, which is hopefully going to make it a bit greener. But in your mind, like where can F1 sort of improve, and sort of what are some goals they could focus on? Not just F1 as an organisation, but as a sport, as the teams involved.
So we are all working and collaborating together on taking a step change into the 2026 regulations, and I think there's a couple of things. One is unlocking those regulations to enable teams who have the will, the skill, the appetite, to the freedom to innovate in this space and give back. I think that's the first thing. And then I think the second thing is there's no getting away from the fact that we travel around the world and we're a global sport, and so we are all working together at the moment on the F1-led freight that's being sent around the world. I think, Formula One are also looking at the race calendar. It's a complex, difficult journey, and let's see where we get to.
What is that F1-led freight? I mean, that's great. Is that sort of a F1 initiative that all the teams are getting involved?
So it's just that F1 have a, I guess to be efficient, we all put our freight for the cars, for example, together into one package, if you like, and then F1 organises that, and we have our share, and then we contribute to that so that it all gets there together. But then we all separately will send other aspects that we do on an individual team basis in a different way.
And you mentioned about the calendar, really, like how big an impact do you think stuff like moving, and we've had a bit this year, obviously Suzuka's come a lot earlier, so it's sort of with a lot of Asian races. Does that make a big impact to the sustainability of the sport in general, really?
Yeah, so race calendar is a really interesting one because what might look logical on a map, depending on your transport routes, might not actually make a huge amount of sense. And the gaps between races is also important because you need time to get from one to another. So sometimes having a 2-week gap or having a back-to-back can make a difference to how you have to send things. So it is a very, very complex chess game, if you like, of how you organise that. But calendar does matter, not just for environmental impact, but for well-being. You know, we've got more races than ever, and many time zones for the teams to cross over, and so it's really, really important that we support them in that space.
And think about F1 in general, like sort of how much progress has been made in like the last 10 years, last 20 years in terms of this first, because from the outside looking in, it looks like a huge amount has happened, like both as a sport, as a competitive side, but especially this side, like especially the sustainability drive. It seems quite unrecognisable from the sport it was like 10, 20 years ago. Is that sort of how you feel like working in it as well?
So I've only worked in Formula One for 2.5 years, so it's hard for me to comment on that. But I certainly think that we've got a new generation of fans coming through who really care about these sorts of issues. We've got more female fans than ever. So I think that's driving some of the attention on it. You know, the reality is you just have to look at some of the heat that we experienced last year at some of the races. The realities are hitting us, and so we have to address that. The other thing is we have an incredible number of fantastic partners, and they all care about this, and so they put pressure on the sport as well, and I think that's quite helpful actually.
Working with those partners, do you think that's sort of like they have to buy into that? I know you said they're very excited to do so, but have you sort of made that clear, like if you want to work for McLaren, we're not going to have you have to be sort of on board with that? Is that something that you try and get across to them?
Sustainability is absolutely part of all of our conversations with prospects and partners, because we all have a responsibility. The level of how much of that's at the front of the conversation really depends on the nature of the partnership and the organisation. But we are doing some great work with a couple of our partners that I would talk about at the moment. So Ecolab on the sustainable aviation fuel, and Deloitte on our circular car project. On the social side as well, they're really interested in how we can accelerate the diversity, equity and inclusion of our sport. And so we've just launched the second cohort of our 60 Scholars programme with Google, Cisco, Deloitte, and our learning platform Udemy is also supporting on that. And that's really important because that's about how do you help young women find a pathway and a career in STEM. And we need more female engineers, full stop, in society, but then also to open their eyes to what the opportunities are within motorsport that aren't just behind the wheel. There's a vast amount of opportunity, and I think people just don't understand that. So the more that we can give people those opportunities, the better.
Is that something you've also noticed during your time? Because from my personal experience, like you could be like a year, next year there's so much more female representation, not just female, but obviously a lot of different races and stuff like that. Is that something that you've noticed just in your time?
So at McLaren Racing, we started our diversity, equity and inclusion journey a few years ago in real focus, probably so just post-COVID. And we've, it's such a vast area, we decided that the place to start was focusing on gender and women in motorsport. And I feel like we've come a massively long way. So, we now have 20% women in our team, which is, significant growth from a few years ago. We've got a long way to go, but we're pushing there. We've entered a couple of years ago the Extreme E race series, and that's important because you have gender parity in the drivers. And then of course we've now got Bianca Bustamante as our first ever driver in our driver development program, driving in F1 Academy. And again, having those role models. We've also got more women than ever in senior leadership positions, but also most importantly we're seeing that a real good balance in early careers. Obviously, it's easier to achieve it there than more senior positions, but it's a place where I think women like me feel welcome, and I think it's testament to the shift in culture.
And what would you say to someone who's listening to this? Maybe they're maybe school age or whatever. They're sort of listening to you, thinking it sounds like a great job. Maybe they love F1. They also care about the environment. What would you recommend to them as maybe like steps to get involved, or like where's the best thing for them to do?
So we do all sorts of STEM outreach programs. So we work with the Small Peace Trust and we do STEM days in schools. We offer work experience and apprenticeships. We have programs, we support programs like Girls on Track. And Girls on Track is a really good example of something where we have team members who learnt about the industry and made their connections with the team and now have jobs. Equally, we recruited some of the 60 scholars who came through. So it's looking for those opportunities. It's so easy to make connections through social media and to track what's happening. But I would say take those opportunities to learn, to make connections, and if they come through for you, then take the experiences that come across your door and seek them out, and you never know where it's going to take you. I certainly never thought I'd end up in motorsport.
Yeah, very cool career path. It's been a great chat. Sort of last few questions, like probably the last question, but sort of what's next for McLaren? Like, do you have a goal in mind that you say, okay, I want to do this, I want to achieve this? Is there something that you've always sort of really hoped that the team could do, and you sort of put that maybe a circle around in the calendar saying, I want to do it by this day? Is there something like that?
Well, I think we've got a really clear strategy. So we've committed to net zero by 2040, which I know is a very long way away. What I really want to achieve is really getting more depth and progress on our 3 climate contribution programs in partnership with McLaren Accelerator, who is our team of engineers who take the F1 know-how, expertise and mindset into our partners. That's, I think, really important. I would love to see some of our partners come on board, because I think that collaboration richness, we can bring a certain amount of experience to the table. The organisations that we're working with also have great experience, but the more we can get that collaborative effect and different minds and skill sets together, I think that's huge. The F1 circular car project that we have, we've obviously got this great piece on recycled carbon fibre. We're working with Deloitte on that project, but I would love to see that taken to the next level. And for me, big success will be if we can unlock the regulations so that we can really open up innovation that we can give back to society. That would be amazing.
Perfect. That's been a great chat. Fascinating talking to you. Thanks again for taking the time, Kim.
Thank you. Great to speak to you.
My thanks to Kim once again for joining me, and my thanks to you as well for listening along. That brings us to an end of the Behind the Papaya week here on the show. We'll be back in the near future with some more episodes, but in the meantime, make sure you subscribe in your favourite podcast app. You can also follow us on socials at Pondering Papaya, and you can send emails or questions to inbox@ponderingpapaya.com. We'll see you again soon.